Coming up on this episode, how seriously are the Warriors really taking this 9 versus 10 play-in tournament matchup against the LA Clippers on Wednesday? And a major trade report on Monday night that raises optimism of the Warriors landing another star in the offseason. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a good start to the week. Been thinking here over the past 24, 48 hours, been listening to what's coming out of the Warriors in recent days and what's been said by notable members of the media. It's got me wondering, how seriously are the Warriors actually taking this 9 versus 10 playing game against the LA Clippers that will take place on Wednesday? Obviously, the Warriors are going to want to win, right? These are the most competitive athletes in the world. Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Steve Kerr as head coach. You do not get to where you get to as four-time NBA champions at this franchise without having an incredible amount of competitiveness. And that means that every time you take to the floor, and particularly in a nationally televised game such as this with the season on the line, you are going to want to win. The Warriors want to push through the play-in tournament and make the playoffs. But there are things that Steve Kerr and the franchise can put in place that ensures that they have less of a chance than what they otherwise could potentially. And that starts with obviously the minutes restriction, which Steve Kerr spoke about after Sunday's game against the Clippers, talking about he's not going to push Steph or Draymond, Al Horford, Porzingis to 40-plus minutes in this game. It's been talked from ESPN's Anthony Slater about Steph's minutes restriction being around 34, which is low for an elimination game, must be said. But we know Steph had the 27-game absence due to the runner's knee injury. So I'm sitting here thinking, are the Warriors going to be really, really disappointed if they lose on Wednesday against the Clippers? They're going to be super disappointed? No, I don't think so. Kendrick Perkins had a pretty good point, I thought, and I don't listen to Perk a whole lot, but I thought he had a good point when he said these guys aren't dummies. They know who they are and what it takes. These guys, there's not many people in the league in the last decade that know what it takes more to win a championship than Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Steve Kerr. And so they would have an understanding that, hey, we are up against it here. And in terms of the long run and giving ourselves another opportunity, our opportunity is done this season. Once Jimmy Butler went down with a torn ACL, our opportunity to win another championship was thrown out the door. So in order to get ourselves to another opportunity, what's the best thing for us? And that's why I don't think Golden State, I don't think us as fans are going to be necessarily super disappointed by losing Wednesday's game or potentially losing the secondary playing game, whether that be against the Trailblazers or the Suns. ESPN on NBA Today had another interesting graphic which showed that the Warriors, if they don't make the playoffs, if they don't get through this play-in tournament, they'll have a 9.4% chance of a top 4 pick of jumping up from their currently 11th worst odds in the league. Current 11th worst odds come the lottery. A 9.4% chance to jump into a top 4 pick. And then if they made the playoffs, went through the play-in tournament, that have a 2% chance, according to ESPN's analytics, of beating the reigning champion Oklahoma City Thunder. So what would you prefer at the end of the day? And that's why I think the Warriors will go out there. It's Steph Curry. He's going to be trying to play his best, put on a show. This is where, as much as the play-in tournament can be a little bit Mickey Mouse, like as a young player, right, you can build your reputation to some degree. Like if you're Brandon Pajemski, it's like, would I like to go out and drop 30 in a playing game? People are kind of laughing at me for the whole 30-point performance thing against Sacramento and the storyline around that and the fact that it came against the lowly tanking Kings. Well, let's see if I can do it again in a play-in tournament, elimination game. So there are young players. There's still guys, and there's plenty of guys on the Warriors. There's 6, 7 guys contracted for next season. There are guys playing for contract. A big performance in an elimination game like this could make some kind of difference. But I don't think the Warriors are going to be too disappointed if they lose. And yes, they will be taking it seriously, but not as seriously as if this was Game 7 of the first round series against the Houston Rockets last season, for example. So I spoke a couple of days ago after Sunday's loss that I think there's probably primarily an 8-man rotation here, but given there is a minutes restriction in place for Steph and essentially all these other guys, you would have to go to 9 or 10, right? Brings a guy like Seth Curry into the mix, Will Richard potentially, Charles Bassey. I actually don't know if Charles Bassey's available. We haven't heard anything about that to this point. I'm confused. Someone please let me know. Because his 10-day contract actually ends today, I believe. I'm very confused as to whether Charles Bassey is available or not. I don't know if we'll hear anything about that in the next 24 hours. But I would imagine the Warriors will go to a 9-10-man rotation, even if the 9th and 10th guys play pretty limited minutes. Like I'm talking 7-8 minutes max. Where do the Warriors go to in terms of their starting lineup? We saw them start 3 guards on Sunday against the Clippers. Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard and obviously the Warriors Plus Minus podcast has spoken about the idea of DeAnthony Melton potentially starting again in a 3-guard lineup to ensure they have a matchup for Darius Garland rather than asking Steph or Pods to take that. Obviously, Steph wouldn't, but Pods to guard Darius Garland, you don't really want that. So could Melton start? Gee come off the bench to give you a little bit more offensive juice off the bench potentially because his minutes with Steph, since Steph's come back, haven't necessarily been great. Draymond guarding Kawhi, we're likely to see that. Very interested to see what the Warriors do with Kawhi Leonard because Kawhi's had a career best season. Nearly 28 points per game, insane efficiency as always. Been quite incredible. And are the Warriors going to load up on him? Or are they going to give the task to Draymond and say, you guard him one-on-one, see how we go? If you go back to that matchup early March, just over a month ago, the Warriors did throw some double teams at Kawhi, particularly in the first half, and it worked. The Warriors got a double-digit lead, I think it was, in that game, and then sunk in the second half, unfortunately. Kawhi was incredibly efficient, had 23 points, but he only took 14 shots in the game, 9 of 14 shooting from the floor. So do the Warriors throw double teams at him again and say, elimination game, we want the likes of Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr., Brook Lopez, Nick Batum, John Collins, these guys to beat us instead? The issue here is they've got a secondary offensive star in Garland, which the Warriors just don't have, obviously, because they lost Jimmy Butler. That's the problem, I suppose, with loading him. And I think that matchup was actually Garland's first game back after his injury absence and his first game with the Clippers. So you could have probably afford, because Garland was not on the floor as much, obviously, and just trying to get integrated into the team, you could afford to throw more doubles at Kawhi when there's not a secondary offensive star out there. Not so much the case now, necessarily heading into Wednesday's game. And then what did the Clippers do to Steph offensively? Steph's had a couple of really great games against the Clippers in the last couple of years. Like he's had a 41, a 36-point game. And then he's also had some stinkers as well, where I was looking in the numbers, like his averages against the Clippers in the last 10 games are not necessarily as bad as this kind of, I feel like there's a reputation out there that Ty Lue does a lot of different things to try and guard Steph Curry and stop Steph Curry. If you look at the numbers, like Steph's like 25 points a game against Clippers in his last 10, right? It's not otherworldly, but it's not terrible either. It's like he's 40%, 39, 40% shooting from 3-point range. Like, I think the reputation of Ty Lue being some kind of coach that could work Steph Curry out, I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. But nonetheless, I'm going to be interested to see, do they load up on him? Because if I was Ty Lue, I probably would. I would load up on Steph and say, you know what? If we lose to a team that going into this game, the Warriors do not have, outside of Steph, another player in their main rotation who shoots better than 37.1% from 3-point range. Hodge is like the second best 3-point shooter on the team at 37.1 of guys that are going to be available and playing big minutes in this game. So really, if I was Tyler, I'm probably loading up on Steph and saying, all right, we're going to live with Pod's threes, Draymond threes. Like, is Porzingis going to continue to bomb threes in this game? Or is Steve Kerr going to be like, no, hang on, let's be a little bit more deliberate with our offense? Because KP's one of his last 15 from three-point range? I know he's shooting 10% from three in his last 3 games. And some of them have been pretty terrible as well. This shot is incredibly flat. KP came out yesterday and said that he's a couple of pounds overweight from where he would like to be. Not overweight, because that's not very fair, because he's like a stick. Like, in normal standards, Kristaps Porzingis is still very slim, but he did say that he's feeling that he could lose a couple of pounds to increase his defensive mobility, and maybe some of the lift and therefore the arc in his shot potentially could be improved by losing a couple of pounds. But that's an issue for next season if he's back with the Warriors, not for right now, obviously, heading into this play-in tournament. I do think I thought initially that a guy like Seth Curry might be out of the rotation in this game and not play at all. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, if they're like going to load up on Steph, then Seth is probably, like, this is sad to say, the dude's played less than 135 minutes all season. But Seth Curry might be the second best jump shot maker on this team. Like, he just is. Like, he shoots, yes, he's played less than 135 total minutes this season, but he shot 48% from three-point range. And if you're talking about, okay, what guys do I want taking a catch and shoot 3? What guys do I want taking a 1 dribble pull up 2? Like, Seth Curry's behind his brother, right? Like, he's a much more efficient jump shooter than Pods, D'Anthony Melton, anyone else you want to list. Therefore, I think he probably has to play in a game like this, because I think you're going to need that shot making. So I'm going to be really interested to see the tactical battle here, particularly when it comes to guarding the opposing stars in Kawhi Leonard and Steph Curry. But I'm pretty comfortable in saying the Warriors are not going to be incredibly disappointed in a way that you might normally be if they were to lose this game. Golden State's season is still alive, but for many fans, there's already one eye on the offseason. What can the Warriors do to rebuild their roster, retool their roster, and potentially get back up into deep playoff contention? Major report on Monday night US time does raise optimism of the Warriors potentially landing another star this offseason. Notable NBA insider Mark Stein had a fairly big report, which started off with 3 big names heading into the offseason. They are Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, whose future and career at the Milwaukee Bucks may now be over after they were officially eliminated at the end of the regular season and have already moved on from head coach Doc Rivers. Kawhi Leonard, who the Warriors will see in Wednesday's playing game, and of course LeBron James as well, who's still got a playoff appearance to come for the Los Angeles Lakers, but their chances have been sunk somewhat by the injuries to Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves. Really interesting here when it comes to these 3 players, because they've all been linked to the Warriors at some point or another in recent months, you would say, let alone years, to be honest. So the simple math of this as we move forward into the offseason is that the more stars that become available, the wider the net of available stars, then the more chance there should be more of a chance of the Warriors actually landing a big fish. And a direct quote here from Mark Stein in his piece said, there is a growing anticipation in numerous front offices, league sources say, the 2 or even all 3 of the above marquee names, that's Giannis, Kawhi, and LeBron, could land with new teams next season. So at least 2, if not all 3. And so I don't know. I might be just being a little bit biased here. I might be putting my Warrior hat on and hoping more than actually believing. But I think if all 3 of Giannis, LeBron, and Kawhi are at new teams at the start of next season, one of them will be at the Warriors. Like, I don't think that's outrageous to say, because, again, the Warriors have been linked to all 3 guys. And so it's almost like dominoes. It's like, all right, can we get Giannis? No, we can't. Let's move it down next to the line. Can we get Kawhi? No, we can't. No, all right. Can we get LeBron in free agency? And like, I feel like the Warriors are going to go hard enough at literally all three guys that if you're going to go hard at three guys, then you're probably going to be able to land one of them. Now, how that exactly happens, particularly when it comes to Giannis and Kawhi, who are under contract at big numbers salary-wise and the salary matching aspect of this, I'm not particularly sure. I would probably have, in terms of the most realistic, I would almost say LeBron's the most realistic just because the Warriors could get him in free agency. They have the pathway to be able to open up the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Perhaps LeBron, this deep into his career, would say, yes, I'm finally ready to take a pay cut. I'll take the $14, $15 million for next season. As opposed to, I spoke about this a few days ago in regard to the Giannis talk, and obviously his future is going to be up in the air again. And I expect the Giannis trade to happen. I just don't see how it happens with the Warriors because what's the salary matching? If it's not Jimmy Butler, and I think the ideal aspect for the Warriors here is to add one of these guys to Steph and Jimmy, not subtract Jimmy and replace him with one of these guys. Even though you would argue that it's an upgrade. Okay, if you could go Jimmy to Kawhi and maybe use, I don't know how many first round picks it would take. 2, maybe? I don't know. Maybe it's 1 and pods. Giannis, it would obviously take a heap of first round picks. What happens at the draft lottery? I spoke about this with the Giannis aspect of this. What happens at the lottery, assuming the Warriors don't make it through to the playoffs, is going to be huge because if you get a top 4 pick, then suddenly that makes all the difference in Giannis conversations. But even still, like the salary matching of this is pretty difficult to try and get your head around because Draymond, sure, if he opts in to $27.6 million, sure, immediate trade candidate, absolutely. But I just think he understands that to a point that he's not going to opt in. He's going to actually be willing to say, all right, I'm going to opt out. Can you give me something that's around 15-ish a year? And maybe for 2 or 3 years, maybe I get 2 years, 30, 35, or 3 years, 40, 45, something along those lines. Because he would know if he opts in that, hey, I'm taking the cash, but I'm probably going to get utilized in a trade, which for the Warriors might be the best thing. I think upgrading Draymond to Giannis, Draymond and whatever else other pieces it takes to get to Giannis, like that's obviously a very significant upgrade. And then you can reintegrate Jimmy when he comes back from injury. Whether you can have 3 guys making over $50 million is difficult, but at least like Steph is going to be on expiring. Maybe Steph's willing to take less moving into the future beyond next season. I don't know. We'll wait and see. The same can be said for Jimmy. Potentially takes less. I'm not even sure Jimmy Butler coming off an ACL is going to get more than $50 million a year anyway on his next deal. So super fascinated to see what happens in the offseason because the Warriors do have some different paths they can take. It's going to be difficult to get to a $50+ million player if Draymond wants to opt out and re-sign, particularly given obviously any newly signed free agents cannot be aggregate or cannot be traded until December 15 or whatever. Sign and trades in place that could take place. Porzingis, something like that. What happens with Kawhi and the aspiration investigation? Does his final year of his deal get voided, essentially, taken away? He becomes a free agent. In that scenario, is he willing to take the non-taxpayer mid-level exception? I have my doubts on that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, who has the cap space to max him out or get close to that or give him like more than 30? Who has the cap space to give Kawhi Leonard more than $30 million a season if he suddenly became a free agent? I think if Kawhi became a free agent, there would be some maneuvering, some pretty wild maneuvering going on around the league. What I mean by that is moves such as what the Bucks did last offseason when they stretch and waived Dame and said, we're happy to take the $22.5 million, $22 million cap hit for each of the next 5 years. We're going to be that drastic just in order to get Miles Turner. If the Bucks are willing to do that for Miles Turner, I feel like teams around the league would be willing to go a fair way to go and get Kawhi Leonard if they need to find a way to get, him a $30-40 million contract. Which again, maybe he wants more than that. But I have my doubts on, I feel like LeBron at this point of his career could be willing to take a pay cut and I'm not sure he's going to take the minimum, but he might take the non-taxpayer or even the taxpayer mid-level exception. I just don't think Kawhi is doing that for a year. Obviously, it would be fantastic. You get Kawhi Leonard on the non-taxpayer mid-level at $14-15 million as a free agent. That's unbelievable. But I have my doubts on whether he's willing to take that. Just on Kawhi ahead of this matchup on Wednesday in the playing tournament. Really interesting quote before it on the Warriors and Steph and Draymond and Steve Kerr. Kawhi said he's one of the greatest players to play this game, he's saying of Steph. Even if it's just a pickup game, just being able to share the floor with a player like that, being coached by Steve Kerr, also playing with Draymond, that unit over there of championship pedigree, it's a great opportunity. You can't take it for granted. Interesting quote. So, almost sounds as if he was talking like he was a member of the team. Like he's playing for the Warriors, not the Clippers. I don't know. Does Kawhi Leonard have interest in going to the Warriors? We know the Warriors pursued a trade for Kawhi before the deadline after the Giannis thing fell over. Tim Kawakami mentioned that reported that there was actually a deal close in play. Now, I'm not sure how much I want to believe that, but Kawakami did report that a deal was close. And so the Warriors renew interest in Kawhi. It's funnily enough, Kawhi is probably the best fit from a Giannis and LeBron standpoint out of all those three players. I think Kawhi might be the best fit because Giannis is going to cost the world. And if Draymond's still on the team, that fit just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then if Jimmy's still on the team, the Jimmy-Giannis fit doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. Kawhi's going to cost less, and just as a basketball fit, I feel like that makes more sense. And then, I feel like, obviously, Giannis and Kawhi at this point are far more impactful to winning than LeBron is. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't take LeBron if he was willing to come to the Warriors on a non-taxpayer mid-level exception free agent contract. But I just think, in terms of guys that are going to impact the Warriors next season, Giannis is the best player. Kawhi might be the best fit and the better value because he's not going to cost what Giannis will cost. Kawhi has an extensive injury history, but guess what? Giannis has kind of got an injury history too as well. So let me know. Let me know, do you think the Warriors are going to land another star in the offseason? And if it is it going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kawhi Leonard, or LeBron James? Or someone else? Let me know. I'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in again, guys. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Golden State with Mates on TikTok and Instagram as well. I'll be back for a recap of whatever happens in the 9 vs 10 playing game on Wednesday.